If someone starts mocking Jesus and you feel it, your face gets hot, your brain starts coming up with the perfect comeback because you want to defend your faith, your Savior, your beliefs, but hold on. Before you fire back, what if that's not what Jesus would have done? In John chapter 8, when religious leaders are trying to trap Jesus, he doesn't get defensive, he doesn't argue, and he doesn't preach a 5-point sermon. He draws in the dirt. And then, when they wouldn't let it up, he calmly says to them, "Let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone." Jesus flips the moment, not with force, but with wisdom. Jesus doesn't need you to be reactive. He invites you to be reflective. So, how do we do that today? Well, let's break it down. What do we do when the people around us are rude, negative, and talking smack about Jesus? Do we just put up with it, or do we dive in and say something? Well, I think we should look at what Jesus would have done. What did Jesus do when people mistreated or misrepresented him? And actually, as we read the Gospels, the story of Jesus' life here on earth, we see that a lot of the time when people are not believing him, when they're trying to discredit him, when they are scheming to trick him or arrest him or even kill him, Jesus knows what it's like to firsthand experience how to deal with rude and negative and even hateful people. So, what did Jesus do? Well, sometimes he just flat up ignored them. In John chapter 8, the religious leaders brought a woman caught in the act of adultery to Jesus, trying to trap him into saying something they could use against him. They straight up set him up. But what does Jesus do? In verse 6, we see that says, Jesus stooped down and he wrote in the dust with his finger. Jesus doesn't respond to their attempts to trick or fluster. He ignores them by drawing in the dirt. Sometimes your best strategy in dealing with rude and negative people is to ignore them. Don't let them distract you. But sometimes we know people don't let it up. And in fact, that's actually what happens right to Jesus here in John chapter 8. It says they continued and they demanded an answer. What do you do when people get in your face and continue to slander Jesus around you, especially when they know you love him and you follow him? Well, what does Jesus do? He steps into the conflict, but he doesn't do it like we would imagine. It says he stood up again and he said, "All right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone." When ignoring wasn't working, Jesus engaged with them. But did you see what he does? He didn't get all defensive about himself. He doesn't even get defensive about the woman that they're confronting him with. He just poses a question in his statement. Let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. In other words, which of you has never sinned? Jesus' response isn't loud and defensive. It is pensive and probing. He flips the attention away from him and this woman and back onto them, inviting them to take a look at their own hearts and their lives. You see, sometimes we aren't called just to ignore. We are invited to lean in and to ask probing questions of the people around us. Questions like, "Tell me what you mean when you say," or "It sounds like you've been hurt by the church or religion or God. Would you mind telling me what happened?" Statements like, "I've wrestled with trusting God and church people too. Could I share my story with you about how God changed my life?" Do you see that we don't have to rush in and defend Jesus? I mean, he didn't. He didn't feel the need to defend himself, but rather he leaned in to explore what was happening inside the hearts and the lives of those questioning, those doubting, those belittling him. And that is what Jesus calls us to do. Jesus tells us in Matthew chapter 5, it says, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and he sat down. His disciples came to him and he began to teach them. He said, "Blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." Jesus tells his disciples and is telling us today that we actually should expect that people are going to insult, persecute, and say lies about us and about Jesus. We should expect that. This isn't a if this happens someday, but it's a when this happens. When it happens, our response is not to be one of defense, fighting back, or offense, being offended, but rather we are to be salt and light. Jesus says, "You are the salt of the earth," but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. And neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl, but instead they put it on a stand and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Jesus is telling us that our response to persecution, slander, bitterness, negativity, our response is actually what identifies us as followers of Jesus. It is in the not reacting, not blowing up, not getting responsive that sets us apart from others. And I think you know that's true. I'm sure you can think of someone who is quick to fly off the handle when they disagree with anyone. And you can probably think of someone who responds calmly, who doesn't take that attention on themselves, who doesn't take on the offense, but they also don't allow themselves to be pushed around. You see, these types of people, they ask questions. They dig deeper. They show they're committed to revealing the truth and being a part of the solution. And I get it. That is heaps harder. But that is the witness Jesus demonstrated and the witness he invites us to live into. When someone is rude or negative or slandering of Jesus, our first step is to pause, to remind ourselves that we're not called to take on those words personally, that Jesus doesn't need us to be his defender. And as we pause, we can discern. Is this something I'm just called to ignore for right now? Is this a one-time thing? Do I even know this person? Am I supposed to respond, or am I just supposed to be praying for them? Or is this something that God is actually inviting me to lean a little bit more into demonstrating patience, compassion, and love, to ask those gentle and probing questions, and then to actually listen and actually care? You see, what always floors me about the story of Jesus and the woman in John 8 is that he doesn't seem to care a single bit about those religious leaders. He doesn't care about what they care about. You see, he is leaned in on focusing on showing love to the hurting woman right in front of him. To respond like Jesus is to lean in and focus on showing love to the hurting people right in front of us. Because those people who are spewing hurtful words, being rude and negative, they've probably been hurt. And they're probably needing someone who can show them what love looks like in action.